So overall, I've had a really good experience with the Tower 300 case. And I think for those builders out there looking to do a micro ATX or mini ITX build, I think this case is going to be more than adequate in almost every circumstance. I personally really just like this case. I love the unique look of it. I like the stand here, obviously, and we'll talk more about the stand in just a second. That's probably not going to be for everybody, but it looks equally as good kind of standing up. So it gives you just a bunch of different options. But again, overall, I've really enjoyed building in this. The cable management abilities of this case, on really all the tower cases for that matter, I just like the way that you can build up into the corners here. For me, it's just a lot easier to build in with that particular cable management channel in there. And so I've used the IQ Link system again in this case, which really just undoubtedly makes everything a whole lot easier. But even if I were using, say, some traditional Corsair fans, with all of the different leads, PWM and RGB and the controllers that we've talked about a lot on this channel, that would be very doable in this case. Now, obviously, using a modular power supply will help you with cable management. That, in addition with the IQ Link system that I've used here, which is just one controller and it powers the 9 fans, the AIO, the LCD panel. Although I think the 650 power supply that I've been using kind of in some of these test builds is turning out to not be adequate for that, but I'll maybe do another video on that later. Anyways, the cable management area down here, I was able to tie up all of the power supply cables, put a couple of extensions in here just kind of for some cool looks. And that left me lots of room for the IQ Link hub over here, as well as those extension cables. But again, there would be adequate room here for the controllers, as well as some additional room in the back. And you could even keep stuff into it. You might just have to get creative, as with every case. Now, on this drive mounting location on the right-hand side, there's not a whole lot of clearance between the fan mounting plate and this drive mounting plate. So I measured it. It's approximately 60.5 millimeters. But in my case, that doesn't hardly give you enough room to even put an SSD in here. Now I did mount an SSD over here on the right-hand side, but as you can see here, this little screw in the bottom of the fan here interferes with this SSD, and it doesn't allow the fan cage to close fully. That's as far as I can get it closed without kind of crunching that drive. But removing the screw allows the whole fan and AIO assembly to close fully. Now, with most fan and AIO combinations, the SSD is going to probably be a little bit tight. And unless you're using some slim fans and a slim radiator, I think you're going to have a really hard time getting a 3.5-inch hard drive in that spot. So anyways, just be aware of that clearance. But just to recap, you have approximately 60.5 millimeters from the fan or AIO mounting plate over to the drive sled. Now, back on the back panel, I've got 2 of the QX120 fans mounted here. One of the things you'll want to be mindful of, again, when you're cable managing this, if you're going to do fans back here, is you will want to cable manage so that you can get this back panel off. And it's easy to do with the IQ Link system. I've got just a single cable powering both these fans back here. Left just enough slack to kind of get it out. Now this exposes your drive cage back here. The SSD drives will fit fine in here with the 2 drives. You may run into some clearance issues, potentially doing the 3.5-inch hard drives back here. If you're using standard size fans back here, generally speaking, 3.5-inch hard drives are not going to fit very well. If you need to use 3.5-inch hard drives, I would recommend that you consider using slim fans back here or consider removing them altogether. So mounting all of your components, your motherboard, power supply, fans, AIOs, things like that, all of that's just like mounting them in a traditional case. This case isn't really any different and doesn't pose any obstacles to doing that. As one viewer pointed out in the last video, this case does support some of the micro ATX like Project Zero motherboards where the connectors are on the back. Those slots are in this case. I don't have one of those to try, but the only thing I noted about that when I was kind of taking a look at how that might work out is in this back corner back here where that slot would be, it's kind of a real tight fit back in there. Even though it's great for cable management as a whole, it would be kind of hard to get your hands in there and get some of those cables connected in there. You'd have to kind of fidget around with that or kind of poke the cable out before you completely mounted your board. It's doable though. That's the thing. Any of that you can get done. It's just a matter of how much pain you got to go through to do it. Now, I chose to use this micro ATX board from Gigabyte. This is kind of a budget B550 board. But overall, I'm kind of really liking the micro ATX form factor. And some of the smaller cases that I've done recently, This board just seems to fit better and looks better in my opinion. Now, that's my opinion. Everybody else is going to have a differing viewpoint on that, but that is why I chose to stick with this and not do the Mini ITX board. I think the Mini ITX board would look good in here. Just, you know, it's just a smaller board, and in some cases, like I think it's more suitable to the Tower 100, of course. Of course, that's the only board that will fit. But in this case, I think a micro ATX board just looks a little bit better. But I'll leave that up to you. There's no problem if you go Mini ITX in here. That's just what I chose to do. And it really didn't present any problems. The only thing that's kind of goofy about it is over here on this left-hand side, you know, where some of the I/O cables need to connect. As I showed in the last video, there's kind of a tight wrap around to get them connected there. But not a big deal. Overall, when you get it done and wrapped up, looks fine. Now, as far as cooling options, I've currently got this configured with 8 of the QX120 fans from Corsair. These are the IQ Link fans. Really cool, work really good. I've also got the IQ Link AIO in here. I've got the 360 millimeter version, and then I've got the LCD upgrade kit, which I showed in a previous video. Now, I also configured this with a CPU heatsink from Thermalright. It's a dual tower CPU heatsink in white, and surprisingly, I really like the look of that. I thought it fit the case aesthetic really well. The only thing that I didn't really love about it was I didn't have any low profile memory to stick in there, and the clearances on the memory with that front fan, I had to kind of shift those fans over. Wasn't a big deal, and in the testing I did with it, it performed just as well as the AIO cooling in this case. But I really did like the look of that, and I'll overlay some B-roll of that so you can see what that looks like here. But currently I've got it configured with the AIO from Corsair along with that LCD screen. Now, I really like that LCD screen because you can kind of change it up and get a bunch of different looks. It's kind of a toss-up to me, though. I really did like that dual tower CPU heatsink in there. You know, you just kind of got to play around with it and choose which one you like. I think from a cooling performance, at least in this case, at least the hardware that I'm running in it, I was able to get equal results. Now, obviously, one of the unique features about this case is you can purchase the stand for this separately, and you can mount it in this horizontal position, which I think is just really unique and looks really cool. And so it does require a bit more of desk space to do that. So you just want to kind of take that into consideration of where you're going to put this. Now, a couple of things to note if you're going to use the stand and have it in this horizontal position is the case, when it's fully populated, is not extremely light. So it is a bit of a chore to kind of rearrange it and move it around. So you just want to kind of exercise caution after you have it on the stand. If you need to get it out and move it around, it's not real simple to do. And that could be kind of even more of a pain if you've got all your cables tidied up in the back and you've got to undo everything and kind of get it up and reorient it. But not a big deal. It just is going to depend largely on what your space is. But just be aware of that. You're not just going to come over and pick it up and flip it around. You just got to use some caution when you're doing that, or you could drop it, break it, so on and so forth. Now, another thing to be aware of if you're running it in this horizontal position is if you're using the radiator and it's in this top position and you flip it the other way around, because it will go either way, no problem. It doesn't make any difference to the case or the stand. You could put this pump in the top position higher than the AIO. Now, we all know that everybody's going to have a freak out moment if you do that. Now, I've ran it like that and even pushed it through, some of the Cinebench tests and things like that. But again, best practice is to leave it in this orientation, have the radiator at the top and the pump at the bottom. Now let's talk real quick about your data cables coming out of the rear here. That's fine in and of itself. It's like the other tower cases. I don't have any issues with that. Again, you really can't get in and access the I/O area of this case. You can take the front glass off and kind of get up in there, but then you're right up next to the fans. It can be a bit of a pain. As one viewer pointed out, one thing you can do is you can pop this top cover off while it's running. And we'll set that down. And then there are 2 thumb screws, as you recall, up here at the top. Now, when you're cable managing this, if you can cable manage it properly, and so that you have some slack here, you can just undo these 2 thumb screws, and then you can undo the fans here, and you can gain access into where your cables are. These are my keyboard USB cables right here. And so obviously it makes it a little bit easier to get in. And of course you can get to your HDMI cables and things like that and get into all the cable management up at the top here. And again, I've just got it cable managed with IQ Link, that these 2 cables here give me enough slack in it that I can mess with it. But you could do this while it's running. Now, obviously, depending on the orientation on your desk, this may or may not be easy to do, but I wanted to point this out to you so you can kind of see how you can get up in here while you're running it. And then of course you can just put it back on there. Tighten the 2 thumb screws down. Then when you're putting the top cover on, you just want to kind of make sure these are out of the way of the holes there. Line your top cover back on. Little tap all the way around and you are ready to go. Now obviously you don't need the stand and you don't need to run it in this horizontal position. You can skip the $30 stand if you want. The new stand comes with this end cap over here and it comes in whatever color you order it in. Again, you can match it up to the case color you have or get it whatever you want. Now I have a few times as I've been messing with it, laid it up on this stand here. Again, you got to be careful because it's kind of a heavy case. Get that out of the way. But that bottom end cap seems to be adequate to hold it like this, but I don't think it's meant to run like that, and I would recommend that you don't. You know, setting it up on here for just a minute might be okay, but again, there's a lot of weight sitting on that. Over time, that may collapse or whatever. I just can't guarantee it's going to be long term, so I wouldn't do that. You know, for brief moments in time to do some configuration, that's fine, I think, to do that. You know, put some protective mat down there. But what I would do is, obviously, if you want to put it back to the vertical orientation, I would put the feet back on it. So let's set it back down horizontal. And again, you just got to kind of use caution when you're doing this. And it's not super heavy, but it's heavy. Then we can just reattach the feet with a couple of screws. But obviously, if you're going to put the feet back on, you want to put your filter back on. Which just slides back in. But then you can go ahead and put it back into a vertical position here. So let's set it back up on its feet now. But of course you can run it in the vertical position like this, and it looks great in this orientation as well. You don't have to purchase the stand. And I think still the stand was $29.99 for the whole kit. So it'll just be really up to you how you want to run it. But works just fine like this. You can still get access to the top panel. You can pull your fans off, get access to your I/O. So let's talk about the cable I/O area for just a second. Now in the previous video I mentioned that this is one of the areas that I wasn't crazy about when I bought this case to do this video on and play around with it. So I wasn't sure I really was going to like that. But I'll be honest with you, after I got this motherboard in and kind of got it all together, it kind of grew on me pretty fast. I kind of really like the look of it. This is maybe where a cheap motherboard is going to pay off, because there's really no built-in cover to this motherboard up there in that I/O area. But that only kind of added to the effect to me. It looked just a little bit more industrial, looked a little bit more cool as far as I was concerned. I have to say that I really kind of don't mind the open-endedness of this I/O area. Way less than I thought I would. In fact, I kind of like it. Now, I did do one thing is I put this USB drive on here. I found this a little while back. This is called a Flashatron 3000. It's really just meant to kind of mimic the flashing lights, you know, from movies back in the 50s and things like that. It actually runs pretty hot in here because it's kind of a solid steel case. But I was just trying to look for anything to kind of stick up in there and kind of highlight and accentuate that area. Anyways, I kind of thought that looked really cool, but you know, that's just my opinion. Whether I'll leave it there or not, I don't know. But anyways, I'll link to that in the description below if you want to check that guy out. It's just a 64 megabyte USB drive. It's not going to set any records for you. It's meant to look cool more than anything. But anyways, be aware if you're a little bit hesitant about this I/O area up here. I was kind of surprised a little bit as to how much I actually liked it. That's really what I want to say about that. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, I'm kind of playing around with some ideas for some other covers and things like that that I could put up here in this top area, even though I was pleasantly surprised of how much I kind of like the way that it is. I'll do a follow-up video if I find some other really cool things you could do, but let me know in the comments below what you think of that, and do you have any other ideas of some things you could do to spice that up or make it look better. Now, I did mention in the previous video that this AIO and fan bracket will fit over here on the left-hand side. And although it will do that, I think there's going to be some interferences with the connections on your motherboard in the back there. Obviously, if you're using one of the Project Zero boards that puts the connectors on the back, that might improve that. But I have not tested moving that over here and trying to put fans. Obviously, GPUs are primarily what's going to get in the way. But there just might be some options over there for some custom builds and things like that. Let me know in the comments below if you've tried anything like that. certainly you can get almost anything to work, but again, I haven't tried it, just be aware of that. I guess the main point is the bracket does fit over there. That might open up some options for you. Now, as far as cooling performance, I've worked with this particular set of hardware in other cases, and in this case, it's performed largely about the same, which I'm going to take that to mean, for the most part, that this case really didn't contribute to any additional heating problems. It didn't really, make it any cooler, so to speak. So in that case, the case is kind of neutral, at least for the hardware that I'm using. This is not super high performance hardware that's in here by any stretch. Now, how I've got it currently configured, because I tried a number of different configurations here to see if anything stood out as being better. Now, how I have it is the PSU fan down here is an intake, and I've got the 3 AIO fans over here as intakes, and then the top 2 fans and the rear 2 fans as exhaust fans. I don't know how effective the rear fans are here because there's a whole lot of obstacles. They sit right next to those drives and the motherboard, but they do contribute for sure. Now, I did try a number of different configurations, making this one an exhaust, these exhaust on the top, and vice versa. I went through a whole bunch of iterations of moving these around, and because it's IQ Link, it's fairly easy to undo them, swap them around, and change their orientation. This obviously would be even easier with some of the SWA fans where you can just pop the blade out and put a new blade in. But all of the testing that I did and what I was doing basically is just running them through Cinebench and kind of just monitoring the temps over 30 minutes to kind of see what the peak of that was. And really, I didn't notice any major differences between the two, maybe a degree or two, but that could just be within the variances of, the ambient temperature of that particular run. There wasn't any outliers as far as I was concerned, and that's not a real scientific test, of course, but overall, and I did run through some Prime 95 tests to kind of really heat this up, and I never was able to get this hardware really above 83, 84 degrees Celsius, at full tilt. All of those tests, generally I ran the fans at 100%. If I run the fans like all at 20% where it's really quiet, the case does heat up. The idle temps aren't really good at that, but it doesn't take very much of a kick up in the fan performance to get the idle temps down. I don't have any real concerns with cooling in this particular case. The one thing I think I might do, this case would perform a little bit better, I think, if you did 140 millimeter fans in here, and it is capable of doing that. Instead of a 360, you could put a 420, you could put a 140 millimeter fan on the top and the bottom here. And I think that would increase your cooling performance and quiet it down a little bit. The QX120 fans aren't super quiet when they're at full tilt because they're about 2,400 RPMs. In fact, they're quite noisy at that RPM range. So that would be one consideration is to bump up to 140 millimeter fans in this particular case if you're going to do it. That will increase your cooling performance, but if you're just doing basic stock settings on your hardware on this, as long as you're not doing some high-end, crazy stuff and things like that, I think this is going to be more than adequate in the cooling department. You can get big AIOs in here, which are great. It's got lots of options for fans, but I wouldn't have any concerns putting any of the equipment that I've worked with in here and getting it to cool to where it would be acceptable and perform just fine. Let me know in the comments below what your experiences are with cooling with this case. So overall, I've had a lot of fun doing the builds in it, trying a whole bunch of different configurations, testing with it. Again, as I mentioned, I haven't had any real issues with it. Everything's been fun to build with. The cable management is good. Installation is great with the IQ Link system. A couple little, quirks about the upper I/O panel here and kind of getting some of your cable management right. A little issue with the drive over here if you're going to do a thick AIO. But other than that, it's been a really good performing case. Cooling wise, I don't have any major concerns with it. Unless you're doing some really high-end, crazy overclocks and stuff like that. Then you just want to be sure that it's got enough positions for you to do whatever you need to do. But that's going to do it for the Tower 300. I think it's been a great case. Let me know if there's anything specific you want to see about the case that I didn't cover in a couple of these videos. I'm happy to keep kind of testing around with it if there's something somebody wants to know. And anyways, that is going to do it for today. Thanks for watching.